Welcome to the Ministry Pivot Podcast with Russell St. Bernard, a podcast designed to assist leaders as they seize the season of opportunity by pivoting toward it. Let's get started with today's episode.
Hey, family, Reverend Russ, back again with another Ministry Pivot episode. Super excited that you decided to join us, whether it's today, whether it's tonight, no matter what time it is, whether you're in the car, whether you're in the gym. Super excited you decided to join us and share a couple moments with us. Don't forget to go on to ministrypivot.com. Don't forget to like, comment, share, to follow, to subscribe. That's how this channel gets pushed up. And of course, don't forget to visit all that we have on Ministry Pivot, from our articles to our other conversations, to our Pivot University, to us doing coaching now. If you need coaching in your life and you want to enhance your leadership skills, we would love to have a conversation with you around that. Today, I'm super excited to sit with Dr. Reggie and Dr. Sidney. You're two great men of God, two great men of the faith. You'll be able to hear from them. They have this conference, they have this organization that they're moving forward called Fishing Differently. And so super excited to have them share more about that. And I'm just going to stop talking now so you can hear the conversation that we had today. Pastor Reggie, Pastor Sidney, thank you all so much for getting on today, for getting on to Ministry Pivot. Thank you for taking the time out, carving the time out for us to talk about Fishing Differently, and even all of the other things that God is doing in your perspective ministry and in the ministry that you all are working on together. I gave you all a very brief introduction, but that was nowhere near enough to outline kind of what you've done, the work that God has blessed you to do. So if you can, please, anybody can go first, Reverend Dr. Reggie or Reverend Dr. Sidney, y'all can divide it up. But if you can give us a little bit more of kind of your background and your time in ministry, so that those who are watching, those that are listening, understand who they are being able to hear from on today.
Reggie, I defer to you.
Thanks, Pastor Russ, for this opportunity to share, and looking forward to our conversation together. Reggie Blount, I am AME elder, been in ministry for like 32 years so far, and just stepped down from pastoring this past September to engage in much more of this work that we're going to be talking about today. I'm also on the faculty of Garrett Evangelical Theological Seminary, been teaching there for well over 25 years. And this work of community engagement, congregational leadership, formation, Christian formation, youth and young adult ministry, all of this is are areas that I've been connected to, tied up in, and enjoy doing, and looking forward to talking about it more.
Yeah, Sidney Williams. I come to this work as a finance professional, Wharton Business School graduate, Howard Business School graduate, did my undergraduate work in finance at Howard University, ran from the call for many years, and just wanted to figure out how to make money. And at some point in the journey, felt like I had to give that up to go into ministry full time. I served as a missionary in South Africa, and really just wanted to give my heart to the church. And at some point realized how important I need to be my full self, and began to realize that so much of my hopes and dreams for the church required me to be the fulfillment of my ancestors' dreams while serving the church. And that has led us to where we are today with Fishing Differently and the work we do of trying to help our brothers and sisters in ministry find the resources to do the work that God has given them to do. And I'll say more about that as we have our conversation, but I just feel called to the intersection of faith and economics, or theology and economics, right? That the work that we do can't all happen on Sunday, and the funding for the work we do surely can't always happen on Sunday.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. I think it's a great Again, thank you both, obviously, for being on Pivot. And I know I've said this before, but you both have been obviously Not obviously those who are watching may not know, but both of these gentlemen have allowed me to come in at separate times and share with them and be with them in youth ministry in Chicago and also in the tri-state area. So I appreciate that. But I think Dr. Sidney, we were talking a couple of weeks back when we were in preparation for this and possibility of being on the pivot and talking about the pivot. And you said that line, right, about everything can't happen on Sunday. And I know it to be true for both of your ministries, right? Dr. Reggie, I remember in Chicago, the work that you did there that I was able to be a part of with the youth stuff, but then also the stuff that you did connectionally, right? And the stuff that you were doing in Sydney. I've seen the whole basement of the church and how you all have mobilized and activated. And I've even seen more recently, this will air in a couple of weeks from now, but more recently to today, I've seen, your first, I don't know if it's the first, but I've seen that nice truck that y'all got, that food truck. And I know what that means. And the understanding that a lot of what Pastor Watley, big shout out, my pastor here, Kingdom Fellowship, Pastor Matthew Watley, appreciate you, Doc. But he always says too that there's so much stuff that they did not teach us in seminary. And seminary is awesome, right? It is great. It's a great foundation. We should all go. You need to go get studied, know, learn. But there's so many things. And one of the things, right, is how, to both of you all's point, that ministry expands beyond Sunday. And there's so much that it expands beyond Sunday. And I think that's a great segue to ask you all, one, how did you all connect in this type? How did you all connect, period, in ministry? And being able to know that like-mindedness and kind of serving together in ministry. I'm going to pause. That's one question. How did you all connect in ministry?
So I'll tell you the clean version of the story.
Okay, please.
But no, I'll tell you, I'll be transparent. I'm a stalker, right? So I love social media. I watch people's posts, and I admire Reggie's posts. His stuff was solid, consistent posts. And that's how I got to follow him on social media. And so I noticed he was going out to San Francisco in 2019 to a conference that I had interest in. And so we met up in San Francisco, and I was at a place where I was kind of tired of the same sort of path, same conversations in ministry. And I was sharing with Reggie that, I'm kind of tired of ministry. And he shared with me what he was doing in the 4th Episcopal District, securing grants to help his colleagues. And I said, wow, that's deep. So he was kind of tired too, but he was doing something about that tiredness. And I said, why don't we team up instead of just limiting it to your colleagues in the 4th District? Why don't we put something together where we can serve not even just the AME Church or not just the 4th District, we can serve people across the country and maybe one day even globally. And that was the beginning of a conversation. Who knew the pandemic was coming? But we had a similar passion, similar vision to help our colleagues who were just, basically outmatched, outgunned, trying to do ministry. Got the passion, but not the resources, not equipped to compete. And that was kind of how the conversation started.
Wow. Okay. Go ahead, Pastor. I see you.
I was just going to say, the only thing that I would add to that is, and I know we're going to get to it shortly, but it was also Sidney's model for how to do this work of faith and finance with congregations, or at least his idea on how to do that well. And it resonated with work that I was already doing, but did not have language to describe what I was doing. And so his model around fishing differently, I fully resonated with. And we began to really explore how we could expand this for the kingdom.
Yeah. Wow. That's great. So now, Pastor Sidney, help us understand and hear. I know you and I have talked through it. I know you all know it, but for those who are watching, those who are listening, again, thank you for getting on Ministry Pivot. Don't forget to download the show notes. There'll be information about everything that we talk about. But Pastor Sidney, help us to understand this model. Help us to understand the reason for the model, right? Because you got a reason behind it, and you and I have talked through that. But then also what the model is.
Yeah, so we have something, as you know, in the AME Church called Annual Conference that we got from the United Methodist and Methodist Episcopal Church. where we give these annual conference reports, how much money raised, how many members, how many new members, et cetera. And it was early on in my ordination process. I just started crunching numbers. And I realized per capita giving, that is giving per member, was fairly consistent regardless of size of church. Now, you may say, well, why is that important? Well, if you consider that per capita giving is the same regardless of size of church, then that suggests that the efficiency of larger churches is fairly low, right? If I'm building a bigger building, then I should expect per capita giving to be higher. That the members of a larger church should be willing to give more per member than the members of a smaller church. Why is that? If I'm in a larger church and I'm getting all of my needs met, youth ministry, seniors ministry, outreach ministry, my per capita giving should be higher than if I'm in a church that's only open on Sunday morning from 10:30 to 12, right? My per capita giving is expected to be lower because I'm getting fewer services, if you will. And so just from a pure finance perspective, you would not build a bigger store if my customer is only willing to pay the same amount per visit, right? I build a bigger store if I'm seeing that my customer is willing to do a bigger spend, right? I'm going to build a shopping mall if my customer is willing to spend more money per visit.
Yeah.
Then otherwise, I'm gonna just do a corner store, right? If you're gonna spend $10 per visit, I'm not about to go invest into a shopping mall unless I think per visit you're gonna spend more money. If you follow what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So that made me realize, number one, smaller churches actually have greater efficiency, right? They have less overhead, in many cases, less debt, lower mortgage, right? But many people believe they have a smaller church, therefore they have less impact. That the focus means I got to get more members, I got a bigger church. And I started realizing I don't think that's the right focus. I think the focus is, how do I increase my impact, not how do I get a bigger building, right?
Yeah.
Because the bigger building comes with greater responsibility. And so many of us are chasing the bigger building and chase more members, but that comes with more responsibility and more overhead. And so then I started to examine, what makes a church successful, and why is it some churches grow and others seem to get stuck? So then I began to explore, what's the breakout? What's the difference, right? And beyond tithes and offering, because everybody's trying to figure out the tithes and offering game on Sunday morning. But the real breakout is the I in FISH, which is intellectual capital. How do I get the hearts and minds of people, right? And I studied Dr. Lee P. Washington and his model, where he was able to get Matthew Wiley at the time, who was his executive minister, and so many others on that team to contribute their intellectual capital. And most churches, the senior pastor, it's their vision, right? And then as you have people that grow and mature in ministry, we're pushing them out to go to another church. But what I witnessed at Reed Temple in that season was you had these incredibly bright individuals all contributing to the growth of a single church, lay and clergy, right? And oftentimes we don't see that at work. Even in small churches, it's a single leader who's casting a single vision. And you have other people who have the ability to add to that vision, to build to that vision. But instead we're pushing them away, or we're silencing lay people and pushing clergy out to other churches. And so the I in FISH is simply, how do we harness the intellectual capital of the people who are in the pew and the people who share the pulpit with us without feeling threatened, right? And then the S is social capital, right? You're in a place like Prince George's County, or regardless of where your church is planted, you may not have the cash flow or the resources or the tithes in the building, but you have to look in the region which you're in, right? Jeremiah 29:7, seek the welfare of the city to which I am sending you, for in it you will find your prosperity. So it may not be in the pew, it may not be in the pulpit, but it could very well be in the land.
That's good.
Right? And the promised land to which God is sending you, right? Genesis 12:1-3 says, go to the place I will show you, right? Sometimes we miss, it's the place, it's the location. That's the prosperity. We're looking for the people in the pew who are coming to get healed and then frustrated because the offering is low. But you're missing the fact that the place where you are is rich, right? And so I wanted to begin to think about what are these places that we're in, the locations we're in, and what are the resources that are available. And then finally, I made a huge mistake once, and I just want to share this because it's really important. I asked a group of pastors, tell me your mission statement without using any spiritual language. You can't use salvation. You can't use discipleship. You can't use Jesus. Can't use God. Can't use heaven. Can't use Bible. Like, what is your what? Without using any spiritual language. Like, measure your impact for me. What is the impact statement?
Mm-hmm.
And there was silence in the room. But at the end of the day, if we're talking about dealing with food insecurity, improving marriages, improving educational disparities, addressing maternal health issues, how are you improving human lives? When John the Baptist sent the question, are you the one? Jesus didn't use spiritual language. He just simply talked about, can the lame walk? Can the blind see? He gave physical evidence of his ministry. What is the physical evidence of our ministries to make people see this ministry is impactful and it's real? And so that's the H in FISH, which is, what is the human capital improvement? How have you improved the quality of life for people? One of the greatest ministries in my church is our recovery ministry. When we started, some of my members were like, Pastor, they don't have money. They can't contribute to the annual assessment. They can't do this. They can't do that. But here's what happens. When you have people that have recently gotten off of drugs or got out of prison, when you can see a demonstrable difference in their lives, when their mothers come to watch them get baptized, when their children come to see that they're now officers and part of the choir, when they see a demonstrable difference in the lives of people who they once did not want to see, now they want to come join your church.
Yeah.
So I think if we get back to what Dr. Blount calls social impact is discipleship, and people can see demonstrable difference in the lives of people, and marriages are saved.
Yeah.
When kids who had a reading problem can now excel in school because of the help they got from their church. And quite frankly, that's what the Black church was.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll stop there. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. I think I do want you to do one more thing though. So you gave us the I, you gave us the S, you gave us the H. What's the F?
Faith capital. That's the giving, right?
Okay.
So everybody's got the F, right?
Yeah.
But if all you got is the F, you failed.
Yeah. In several ways. In several ways. Yeah.
Don't come on with just F.
That's great. Yeah. No, I think that's great. And what I hear. To be honest, what I hear is the opportunity for churches to understand and for leaders to understand that there's so much potential, right? Quote unquote, left on the table every week.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Quote unquote, left on the table every Sunday. There's a guy who I enjoy reading and learning from, Adam Grant, ton of books. One of the ones I appreciate is Thinking Again, but he has a newer book called Hidden Potential. Right. And he goes through and he digs through the fact that there's some things that you see, but until you dig, you really don't know what it is. And I think your thought through fishing differently just underscores that time. So help me a couple things before we jump to the conference, right? Help me with the pastors, leaders who are listening, who are watching, right? What are some ways they can, my words, reimagine, right? But you both clear words, fish in a different way from what they're doing now, right? What are some things that you all have both done, whether in Chicago or in Morristown, right? What are some things, and what's the thing that you all have seen? I thank God for us here at Kingdom, and I know we're doing it in a couple ways through our Kingdom Care initiative, feeding thousands of people every week. We're opening the Kingdom Care Center coming soon. And knowing that those aren't in competition, they are actually in unison with what God has called us to do as a mission. Again, shout out to my pastor, Pastor Watley. But for the churches who are watching and who are listening, what are some ways that they can, because they might not have thought about it, right? They might not have even had this level of dialogue with two pastors, two leaders who have done it, and they're thinking, well, what does that mean for me? How can I do that?
So one of the areas, and Sidney hinted at it, is to think about the theology that undergirds your work. And
Okay.
so the theology that undergirds our work is what we understand is a social impact is really acts of discipleship.
Mm.
And we enter into that by me giving this illustration of doing workshops with congregations and at conferences around discipleship, and asking the participants the same question that Jesus asked his disciples after they'd been walking with him for 2.5 years: who do you say that I am? And so I'd ask the participants the same question. So who do you say that Jesus is? And I get the same answers that Peter gave to Jesus: Messiah, Savior, all of that. And usually it's a Black church or audience, so I get a little bit more, Lily of the Valley, bright morning star, Rose of Sharon, wheel in the middle of a wheel. I get all of those wonderful descriptions of who they understand Jesus to be, and I applaud their answers and give great recognition to their answers. But then I do a follow-up question, and the follow-up question is, out of all the things you just named, what can you emulate? Because to be a disciple means to be an imitator of the teacher.
That's good.
When they see you at work, they see the one who taught you.
That's good.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus is rabbi in the Gospels. So the question becomes, out of all that you've named, if you can't emulate that, then you have essentially opted out of being a disciple.
Wow.
It's very difficult to be a disciple of divinity. Jesus and our faith teaches us that, yes, Jesus is divine, but it also says that Jesus is fully human.
Yeah.
And so we're truly going to be disciples. Then we have to ask ourselves, what did Jesus do in his humanity while Jesus was on earth, modeled for us, and then said, go and do likewise?
Mm-hmm.
Even Jesus says, when I go away, we just finished celebrating Pentecost 2 weeks ago, right? Almost 2 weeks ago. I'm going to send you an advocate. I'm going to send you the Spirit, and the Spirit is going to remind you of all that I have taught you, and you will be able to do what I have done. And John said in Gospel of John, even greater things, right?
Yeah.
Of what I have done in my humanity.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so what that should tell us then is we need to examine the Gospels to say to us, what is it that Jesus did in his humanity that we're called to emulate? Matthew 25 gives us some great insight, as well as a number of other passages in the Gospels. But Matthew 25 gives the analogy: when I was hungry, you fed me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
When we deal with issues of food insecurity in our communities, it's not just charitable work.
Yeah.
It's not just social service work. It's not just outreach work. When Christians engage in work related to addressing food insecurity, we're doing discipleship work. But what you have done under the least of these, you've done for me.
Yeah. 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 Well, that's great. That's
And
great.
so what I would offer to my colleagues that are listening is, what's the theology that undergirds your work? Are you just doing charitable work? Are you just doing social service work? And is as if it's just something as an aside that you do? Or is it something that truly informs the discipleship that we're called to live out?
Yeah. Yeah.
And if I could add that to Pastor Russ, and it ties to our conference, sometimes we have the right theology, but the obstacle is imagination.
Yeah.
Right. So I know a lot of churches have a food pantry, right? And they meet once a month. The missionaries meet once a month on Saturday, first Saturday.
Yeah.
And they bring their 10 cans from each other's house. Because their imagination only allows them to give out of their scarcity.
Yeah.
When we launched Table of Hope, some of my beloved members said, "Now, Pastor, we can't do this every day. We only have so much." Their imagination was limited to what was in their cupboard.
Yeah. Wow.
And so when Paul says to the church of Ephesus, "Now unto him who's able to do exceedingly and abundantly more than we ever thought, ask, or imagine." But that's the problem, right? Many of us are looking at what's in our checking account, right? What's in our savings, if we have savings. And when the last time we took a chance, this happened. The last time we trusted somebody, that happened. So we're not going to take any chances now. We've always done it this way, and we ain't about to start nothing new now. But you will never walk in the abundance of what God has for us if you don't take a chance. Faith equals risk. You can't say you're a person of faith if you don't want to take risk.
That's good.
And if you're not a person of faith, then you have no imagination, and vice versa. But unfortunately, I think most Christians, if I could say that, most are like, when we get the money, when I get this, if I get that, then I can do this. But faith is based on substance of things not seen.
Yeah.
Yet hoped for.
Yeah.
And I would say too, if our focus then is around this social impact as acts of discipleship, then our why needs to be around that H in fish, right? Everything ought to lead toward how are we making a difference in human lives? Because I think ultimately that was Jesus's why. When we read the gospel, it wasn't about, he didn't ask the 70, how many folk did you bring that you brought in?
Yeah.
And hear me when I say I'm not against congregations growing numerically, but there are other ways that growth takes place that I think that often gets overlooked. When I think about Sidney's congregation, he has a congregation of about 40, 50 members. But the reality is they're doing a $2 million impact work in the community where they're serving.
It's great.
40 members doing $2 million worth of impact work during the pandemic, feeding, being the largest provider of food in Morris County.
Yeah.
And that's replicable.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. And that part, right? The fact that it's doable, it's replicable, right? And the fact that the scale isn't about numbers. I think it's about what we talked about a minute ago. It's about potential, right? But it's also about, and you both hit it, right? Obviously, and I'm gonna ask you about the conference in a minute, but this last statement for me is it's about not putting God or keeping God in that box, right? That we can only do this because we're of this size. We can only do this because we've only done this. We can only do this because the community only supports this. You all I have had much success and have been able to show congregations how to have much success in different ways. And this, I think, brings us to why the conference is needed. So can you share a little bit more about the conference, about why Texas, but really why? I mean, I think we've talked about why the conference, but explain to people when they register prayerfully. You all register today. Don't forget, it's in the show notes. You'll have it there. I'm pretty sure by now, my team, big shout out, Brianna in the background, have dropped the lower third on there. And Malcolm, appreciate y'all for helping out with the pivot. But the people who are watching, they're going to register, but help them understand kind of the why, the reasoning, and what to expect when they show up at the Fishing Differently.
I yield to Sidney on this one, and I'll fill in any gaps if necessary.
Let me speak to conference design. right? Because I got conference burnout. I am so tired of going to conferences where, you sit in these sessions and it's just speaker after speaker after speaker. And usually we bring out, quote unquote, the successful speakers, right? And implication is the people in the audience are unsuccessful, right? Or that the speaker is knowledgeable and the listeners are unknowledgeable, right? And it's a one-way dialogue or monologue, right? And we got to catch this, right? We got to grab what's being said. Our conference is designed around what's called design labs, where it's pure learning, where it's facilitated conversation. One of the books that I used in my dissertation is Bearing the Unbearable, Dealing with Congregational Trauma, where we get so used to what's called violent communication, where someone is speaking loudly to us, and we got it's like a fire hose, and I just got to grab what I can of what's being spoken to us, as opposed to sitting in a circle where we can chop it up and we can talk, right? And so our conference is designed for pure learning, pure discussion, where we can hear each other and talk about the things that are getting in our way. And so we create space for people to do that, and then build networks so that when the conference is over, you've got now a pure network to help you kind of navigate your next, right? We invite foundation leaders, philanthropists, practitioners, pastors, lay and clergy to be in dialogue. So it's not just a pastor's conference, right? There's no big pastor, little pastor. Last year, we had pastors who were on the speaking circuit. We had pastors who just got ordained. And I remember some of the pastors who were on the circuit said it felt so good to be in a circle, right? And not on a stage where they were able to share and just be one of the fellows or one of the girls. And so the design is very different. It's not overly churchy. There is an opening worship service. We pay homage to the God that brought us into this work, but it's very practical. It's very praxis oriented, to get us moving to really practical next steps. And so I think the design is very powerful. We got a lot of positive feedback last year. I think the other reason why we choose different places, we have a cohort in Dallas. I'm excited that we're going to be honoring the president of Paul Quinn College, President Michael Sorrell. He's done some wonderful work. So we're going to have our Impact Awards dinner there. Really impressed with the work that Freddie Haynes is doing around social justice advocacy. But we're also trying to make the link between social justice advocacy and the work of social impact, right? Because we have a lot of people do that social justice work, but then you go back to the same community, you go back home, and the economics haven't changed, right? And if we go back and read Dr. King's Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community, he told us the next step was economic justice, right? So we're still using the old playbook. But neighborhood economics, the focus on building neighborhoods that thrive, is where Dr. King told us to turn our attention. And so while I love a good protest, I believe in social justice advocacy, but where we're losing the ground, where we're losing the fight, is at neighborhood level. And I'll say this last piece that Malcolm X said that I think is so valid. He said, every war, every battle has been over land. And he challenged us in our struggle and our fight. What are we fighting for? Because if we losing land, if we losing our neighborhoods, the right to vote without ownership of land, right? It's got to be a both and. And so many of our Black churches, HBCUs, those are our last institutions in our communities that actually own property. And if we're losing the land, if we're losing ground.
The only thing else that I would add is that if persons come to our conference, it's an opportunity to enter into conversation and worlds that they may not have had access to before. And so when we think about the God-sized ideas that I believe God provides to every congregation and to every community for where that congregation resides, part of the challenge is, how do I access those resources in the community where I'm serving? How
Yeah.
do I begin to talk about connecting with funders, and how do I engage in the language that funders use? Because oftentimes we miss out on grant support and some other things because we don't know how to speak the language that funders speak, to and for us to be able to make the translations from our ministry understanding of work to philanthropic understanding of work. And we might be missionally aligned, but we're missing one another because we don't speak each other's language.
Yeah.
We want to provide that space where folks can come and learn each other's language and recognize that there are resources out there that are missionally aligned with what God is calling us to do.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great, and it sounds like it when you talked about the format of the conference and being in those circles, which would foster that conversation and also foster, the bright ideas in the room, right? Because sometimes you miss that as well, and the opportunity to have that. So give us again, really for the first full time, give us again the dates of the conference, the location of the conference, and the website of the conference, so that those who are watching, those who are listening can capture that. Again, if you're watching, you're listening, this will be in the show notes, but I want them to say it because I know y'all, and sometimes y'all capture it easier when we just say it out. So can you just give us the dates of the conference, the location of the conference, and the website of the conference?
Sure. We will be, the date of the conference is September 5th through the 7th in Dallas, Texas. We will be at Friendship West Baptist Church for the bulk of the conference. We will have our awards dinner at Paul Quinn College on that Friday, the 6th. You can go to Oikos Institute, OIKOS Institute.org to get more information related to the conference. And we're looking forward to having a great lineup. Dr. Joseph Daniels, Joe Daniels, is going to be our opening worship. Leah Rothstein, is that correct? Leah Rothstein, who wrote a phenomenal book. Give me the title again, Sidney.
Just Action.
Just Action. You want to say a little bit about that?
Yeah, so most people don't know her, but they know her dad. Her dad wrote the book Color of Law, which is a powerful book that basically documents the unconstitutional act that was post the Civil Rights Act, where the federal government funded the creation of white suburban communities using federal tax dollars, which is just outright discrimination. And so we know what happened. This is a sequel to the book about how do we correct what happened? What's the next steps, right? So white suburban wealth was created and subsidized by the federal government after the Civil Rights Act.
Yeah.
This is post 1965. This was done.
Crazy. Yeah.
So while we were celebrating a win, the federal government then actively subsidized developers to create white suburban communities, to move white people out of the urban communities, while we continue to languish in depressed urban communities. And so this new book, Just Action, is saying, so now what do we do about that? And her and her dad wrote that book together.
Wow, that's great. That's great. That's great. That's great. It reminds me of, there's a book, Not in My Neighborhood, which sounds like it may be in line with those. But that, okay, so that those are the dates, those are the times of the conference. Who should attend the conference? Sometimes we feel like it's only senior pastors, and I'm saying that because I know this is not the case. But who should attend the conference? Who would be impacted by coming to the conference?
I'm glad you asked that question. I think a number of lay people who are committed to the work of ministry would get a lot out of this. Depending upon, what church you're serving and where you're serving, We have a lot of bright and talented people who are walking away from the church because they're not getting the kind of leadership that, say, a Matthew Watley is giving or a Lee P. Washington is giving. I think this would give them the kind of insight that to see what's possible, so that they can either find out where's the right church for them to serve, or maybe they could better help support the pastor where they are. I think this is the right opportunity for pastors who are just tired of doing the same old thing, and they need some encouragement to try something different, to imagine, right? This is really a great opportunity for church planters who are thinking about something entirely new. Last year, we had someone who was retiring from a denomination where they were just tired of the same old, and they made up their mind they were going to plant a new church. And they came, and this is what they needed to kind of imagine something different. I think the key word is the people who are ready to imagine something different. I think oftentimes we walk away from church because we think it's not possible to imagine something different. And yet the God we serve is always calling us to imagine something different. And I think this conference could be the spark to do just that, and to network with people that are committed to imagining something different.
I think that's great. I think that I'm excited about it. I'm excited about the meaning of the conference, but I would even say the fruit of the conference. I'm also in the show notes. We're going to put you all's perspective, social media, and ways to contact you as well, as leaders maybe looking to just have a little more one-on-one to understand, and even just knowing kind of who's in the room, what they should be looking for. I think that's also going to be important. I know because oftentimes it's so again, I like the format of the conference because oftentimes it's one-way focused, right? Everybody's sitting, looking at the main stage, but having the opportunity to engage with those who aren't just your co-laborers, but even your co-funders, right? Those who can be in that space to help in that way. I think that's going to be a great time. I'm gonna, of course, push this out to those in my network, and prayerfully those who are watching, those who are listening, will do the same thing into their networks. Because again, I think it's funny, again, Kingdom, and thank God for the work that we do here. But I'll tell you, while Sunday morning is super impactful, and we're thankful, one of the things that we are super excited about, me obviously being an old youth guy, is our ministries that happen during the week. But more recently, it's our opportunity to help those who are in need through food insecurity. You know what I mean? Through lack of job readiness, and all of those things that don't happen just on Sunday, happen throughout the week. So this conference being built in this way, I think is great. And Pastor Sidney, you being able to share and have the understanding that a congregation that is the average size of a congregation, right, in America, has that much impact and imprint. Nobody would think it, right? Nobody would think that 50 folk can get together, 60 folk can get together and do millions of dollars of work. But that's the case. And it again is able to be washed, rinsed, and repeated. You just got to be getting it from the right people. So I thank you all for getting on. I don't know if you have any last words you want to say before we close out.
I just want to lift this up. Something you mentioned before we got on. I think this is also a place for people who are curious about the faith, business leaders, people that are trying to do the work of social impact, but don't feel like the church space there's enough room for them in church space, right?
That's good.
This is a great space for them, right?
Yeah.
Because I think oftentimes as pastors, we want those people to walk through the door, but oftentimes they're not walking down the aisle on Sunday and they're not going through the members class because they just don't see that as a space for them to contribute their ideas, their possibilities. I think it's Acts chapter 4, Barnabas, son of encouragement. I think there are a lot of people of great wealth and resources, but in a small context or a small-minded context, there's not enough room for them to share their gifts and talents. Yeah. I think this conference is a place for people that have big ideas, significant resources, for them to come and meet some like-minded people that are willing to meet them and engage in imagination and ideas, whether it's for people coming home from prison, reentry or whatever, whether it's in the recovery space or affordable housing space. This is the place to meet people with great resources and people that have capacity for imagination.
That's great. That's great. That's great. Thanks again. I'm excited and thankful for you both, Dr. Reggie and Dr. Sidney. Thank you all for getting on and sharing with Ministry Pivot, and prayerfully again, the pastors and leaders who are watching, who are listening, won't just hear it, but they'll go register. So again, don't forget to look into the show notes. We're going to throw up the lower third now. That will be able to, you'll be able to type into the website. And if you have any questions or comments, you can hit either of them up, and they'll be able to give you more details to the conference. We're looking forward for a great time in September out there in Texas. I think it's really going to be impactful and really going to be helpful. And the most important part, I'm sure you all will say it, is that it's going to be fruitful, right? That you'll be able to bring back stories. People will be able to hear stories and be able to implement what it is that they get. I think that's to your earlier point, conference fatigue. You know what I mean? You keep hearing about what to do, but not given the roadmap of how to do it. So I think this is super cool. Thank you all again for getting on. I appreciate you guys and looking forward to hearing more about it, and even talking through it in a couple of pivots coming to make sure people that still register for it.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
Hey, family, hopefully you were excited. Hopefully you were inspired. Hopefully you were encouraged. And hopefully some of us were also convicted by what our dear brothers shared, Dr. Reggie and Dr. Sidney, as they talked about the Fishing Differently conference. Hopefully you'll meet us there in Texas. Hopefully you'll meet us there as we go through the Fishing Differently conference coming up in the next couple months. You can find information inside the show notes. You can find information online, even right here, to be able to register for the conference, be able to bring your church down, be able to come down by yourself, be able to get your family and friends to come down so that you can learn more about fishing differently. But also, if you heard the conversation, so that you can be able to be a part of the conversation and the dialogue around those roundtables, and opportunity to see what God is doing in other parts of the country and even other parts of the world. Looking forward to seeing you there. Looking forward to seeing you in our next Ministry Pivot series, our next podcast, and of course, with our Pivot University coming in the fall. And of course, those of you that have signed on to be a part of the coaching network, super excited about that as well. Looking forward to seeing all that God is going to do, because this is your season of opportunity. All you have to do is pivot toward it. God bless.
That's it for today's episode of the Ministry Pivot. We hope you enjoyed listening and gaining some valuable insight. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform so you never miss out on our future episodes. And if today's show has resonated with you, please leave us a review to help others discover our podcast. For more resources and updates, visit our website at ministrypivot.com. And be sure to join our email list, as well as follow us on Instagram at Ministry Pivot. Thanks for joining us today, and we're excited to have you back next time for another insightful episode of Ministry Pivot. Stay connected, keep pivoting. We'll see you soon.